So in this section, we'll talk about the distribution according to need. Now, because the psychological consequence is extremely important, even when wealth is relatively in line with productivity, the ancient sages suggest that distribution policy making must also take into account of the actual need of all the people. In fact, the need-based distribution is an important principle of Confucianism. In the Spring and Autumn Annals, which is, as you know, a history book compiled by Confucius, it is recorded that when Duke Hui of Lu and his wife Zhongzi passed away, the emperor returned a present of 2 carriages and 8 horses. Now, notice here that this present was not the old property of the state of Lu. It was simply a present given by the emperor. But Confucius used the word return. This is because Confucius wanted to indicate that the receiver should have the common ownership in those things with the emperor. Now, Confucius, did recognize the private ownership of wealth. But there's a question over the supreme ownership. Supreme ownership. This is not a legal argument, but a philosophical and ethical argument, which has, in turn, real impact on social harmony. So, what do we mean by that? Why do we share wealth in the first place? And why do you think that? Why do we think about the need of others in the first place? Right? Is there any other rationale apart from, some pure charitable reason? And what is wealth anyway? In the Great Discourse on Wisdom, the Buddha used a metaphor to illustrate that the ownership of wealth is actually much less secured than we think. It says that there are 5 parties. 5 parties may all have a claim on your wealth. For example, the government tax, represented by the king, disasters like fire, flood, accidental loss of wealth by theft, prodigal sons who squander it. So the truth is, no one has the ability to hold on to wealth indefinitely. And it's just like, we call it a dewdrop in the morning. It disappears before you know it. And yet the suffering incurred in acquiring it, maintaining it, protecting it, and worrying about it is very real. So this is the nature of wealth. We're born without wealth, and we'll leave it behind as we die. Now, just how much how much we're able to get out of it while we're still alive, and how much suffering and worrying are we willing to trade for the temporary possession of wealth? And more importantly, I guess, who is going to deal with the consequential social disorder brought about by inequality? In traditional culture, and as we mentioned before, wealth is predetermined by the amount of good deeds one has done in the past, and this is in accordance to the law of causality. Giving it away to those in need doesn't reduce what you are destined to possess in the first place. So based on this, the Great Discourse, the only way to preserve wealth is in fact virtue and causality. And we have mentioned this before. And wealth is only a result based on the past deeds. The ancient sages realized that the nature of wealth is very similar to water. And the nature of water is basically is coming and going, is liquid. Now, based on Confucianism, the supreme ownership of everything is the society. But who are we? Well, we are the temporary possessor. We are the trustee of wealth. Now, if you think about this, the nature is the cooperator in production. Without the nature, nothing gets done. Without the society, nothing gets done. So how can anybody claim absolute ownership of anything anyway? Therefore, the principle of the need-based distribution is not an abstract, metaphorical, charitable act, but it is indeed in accordance with the natural law.